Meeting someone who's truly awakened feels different, almost like they're operating on a frequency that calms everything around them. It's not something they announce, it's simply how they are. There's a stillness in them that isn't just quiet, it's alive. It's as though the chaos of the world washes over them, but never sinks in. This doesn't mean they don't experience life's messiness, but their responses come from a deeper place. What does this look like? Imagine someone who listens without planning their reply. They're not in a hurry to prove anything or shift the spotlight back to themselves. They hear more than just your words, they catch the tone of what you're not saying, the unspoken layers behind your expressions. And when they do speak, their words carry a strange weight. They don't say much, but somehow it always feels like exactly what's needed.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lessons.
These people have a quality that makes you feel at ease, as though you've known them for years. It's not charm or charisma, it's their authenticity. They don't perform. They don't try to impress. When they laugh, it's genuine, and when they admit to not knowing something, it's without embarrassment. This transparency makes it easy to trust them because they have no interest in manipulation or control. Think about this. Have you ever been around someone who makes everything feel lighter? Not because they're trying to cheer you up, but simply because their energy doesn't carry the usual weight of judgment, fear, or expectation. That's what it's like to be near someone who's awakened. It's not magic or mystery, it's just clarity. One of the most striking things about them is their relationship with conflict. They don't avoid it, but they don't feed it either. If someone tries to provoke them, they respond with understanding rather than anger. It's not that they don't feel anger, they've simply learned how to let it move through them without taking over. Watching this in action can feel both strange and inspiring. There's also a consistency in how they treat others. They don't reserve kindness for those they like or agree with. It extends even to people who might seem difficult or hostile. This doesn't mean they're pushovers, they set boundaries with the same calm strength they bring to everything else. They don't need to prove their worth by controlling anyone else's behavior. If you've met someone like this, you might notice that being around them shifts something in you. Not because they're trying to change you, but because their presence shows you a different way of being. Being in the presence of someone spiritually awakened has an effect that isn't easy to describe with logic. It's not because they perform miracles or claim some higher status. Instead, it's their way of living, their unshakable calm, and the way they see life that seems to ripple into everyone they encounter. You don't feel preached to, judged, or coerced into believing anything. Their existence itself feels like a mirror reflecting parts of you that you didn't even realize were there. The first thing you might notice is the way they engage with the world. They approach everything with a kind of openness and clarity that's hard to fake. They don't view life as a series of battles to win or losses to mourn. Instead, they seem to embrace things exactly as they are. This doesn't mean they're passive or indifferent. In fact, they can be incredibly active and intentional, but their actions aren't driven by anxiety or ego. They act from a place of alignment with what feels true. Consider how rare this is. Most of us are driven by fears we can't fully articulate or ambitions that might not even belong to us. We chase goals because we've been told they're important or avoid situations because we're afraid of failing. But an awakened person doesn't seem bound by these same invisible strings. They still live, work, and face challenges, but they do it with a kind of ease that's hard to ignore. One of the most remarkable qualities they have is their ability to be fully present. When they talk to you, it feels like nothing else exists at that moment. Their attention isn't divided. It's not darting between their phone, the clock, or the next thing they need to do. They are just there. This can be disarming because it's so uncommon in a world where everyone seems preoccupied. You may even feel seen in a way that's unfamiliar, almost unnerving, because their presence holds space for you without judgment. This presence has a way of slowing you down. It's not intentional on their part, but when you're with someone like this, you start to notice the patterns of your own mind. The restless need to fill silences, the compulsive urge to defend your opinions, the subtle craving for approval, all these things feel unnecessary. In their company, there's no need to rush. You can breathe, speak, or even just sit without any sense of urgency. Their confidence is another thing that stands out. But it's not the kind of confidence we're used to seeing, the loud, boastful kind that shouts its achievements from the rooftops. Their confidence is quiet and unshakable, rooted in a deep understanding of themselves. They don't feel the need to compare themselves to others or prove their worth because they've already accepted who they are. This makes them incredibly easy to trust because there's no facade, no hidden agenda, no posturing. What's fascinating is how their calm doesn't come from ignorance or avoidance of life's struggles. They faced their own pain, wrestled with their fears, and come to terms with the unpredictability of life. This doesn't mean they're immune to suffering, but they relate to it differently. Instead of resisting pain, they allow it to move through them. They understand that clinging to joy or avoiding sadness only creates more tension. Instead, they experience everything fully and let it pass. Their ability to listen is something else entirely. When most people listen, they're really just waiting for their turn to speak. But an awakened person listens without an agenda. They don't interrupt, they don't judge, and they don't try to fix you. They simply hear you, and that in itself can be transformative. How often do you feel truly heard? How often does someone listen to you without trying to shape the conversation or offer unsolicited advice? This kind of listening can make you realize just how rare genuine connection is. Another sign of their awakened state is their relationship with control. Most of us spend our lives trying to control outcomes, people, and situations. We plan, strategize, and manipulate in an attempt to make life go the way we want. But an awakened person understands that control is an illusion. This doesn't mean they're passive or resigned, it means they've learned to trust life. They don't resist change, and they don't cling to things that are meant to pass. This trust can be deeply inspiring because it shows you another way to relate to uncertainty. What's equally striking is their lack of judgment. This doesn't mean they approve of everything or lack discernment, but they don't see the world in black and white. They've let go of the need to label things as good or bad, right or wrong. Instead, they see things as they are, without the filters of their own biases or conditioning. This creates a space where you feel free to be yourself because you know you won't be criticized or misunderstood. Their relationships are also different. They don't play games, manipulate, or hold grudges. They approach others with honesty and compassion, even when it's difficult. They're not afraid to set boundaries, but they do so with kindness. Their love isn't conditional. It's not based on whether you meet their expectations or fulfill their needs. It's a kind of love that sees you for who you are, not who you could be or should be. Being around someone like this can have a profound impact on you. It's not something they force or even consciously try to do, but their way of being naturally challenges your assumptions about life. You might find yourself questioning the stories you've been telling yourself, stories about who you are, what you need, and what's possible. You start to see that much of what you thought was fixed is actually flexible. And in that realization, there's a kind of freedom. You might also notice that they don't take things personally. Whether it's criticism, praise, or rejection, they don't let it define them. This isn't because they're indifferent, it's because they understand that other people's reactions are more about them than about the awakened person. This ability to stay grounded in the face of both praise and blame can be incredibly inspiring. It shows you that you don't have to be a prisoner of other people's opinions. When it comes to challenges, they approach them with a sense of curiosity rather than resistance. They don't see obstacles as things to fight against, but as opportunities to learn and grow. This doesn't mean they're always happy or optimistic, but they've learned to accept life as it is, even when it's difficult. Their resilience isn't about pretending everything is fine, it's about knowing that even the hardest experiences have something to teach. What's perhaps most impactful about an awakened person is their ability to bring out the best in others. They don't do this by telling you what to do or how to live. Instead, their presence creates a space where your own clarity can emerge. They don't give you answers, they help you see that you already have them. This is why being around them can feel so empowering. It's not about them, it's about what they reflect back to you. If you've met someone like this, it can feel like a turning point. Not because they're trying to change you, but because their way of being shows you what's possible. It's a reminder that life doesn't have to be a constant struggle, that you don't have to be defined by your fears or your past, and that there's a way of living that's rooted in something deeper than the surface-level chaos of the world. When you meet someone spiritually awakened, it often feels like something within you has been stirred, something you might not have known was even there. Their influence isn't direct or overt, it's subtle and unassuming. They don't push you to change, yet you find yourself thinking and acting differently after spending time with them. This isn't about them transferring their power to you. It's about their presence creating an environment where your own strength naturally begins to emerge. One of the first shifts you might notice is in how you handle your emotions. Most of us are used to either suppressing our feelings or being overwhelmed by them. But an awakened person interacts with emotions differently. They don't avoid discomfort, and they don't drown in it either. Instead, they approach emotions as temporary visitors, intense but fleeting, important but not defining. Watching them handle their own highs and lows without losing their center can be a kind of silent teaching. In their presence, you might find it easier to name and face your own feelings without judgment. Perhaps for the first time you realize that emotions aren't something to be feared or fought. They're just signals, indicators of where your attention is needed. This realization can be life-changing because it shifts your focus from avoiding pain to understanding it. You start to see your emotions not as obstacles but as part of the flow of being alive. Their relationship with fear is another thing that leaves a mark. Most of us spend so much time running from what scares us, whether it's failure, rejection, or uncertainty. But an awakened person doesn't have the same resistance to fear. It's not that they don't feel it, they do, but they've learned to face it without letting it dictate their actions. They understand that fear is often just a projection of the mind, a response to things that haven't even happened yet. In their presence, You might begin to see your own fears in a new light. What once felt paralyzing now seems less solid, less threatening. This doesn't mean your fears disappear overnight, but you start to question their grip on you. Why does this thing scare me? Is it really as dangerous as it seems? Over time, you realize that fear loses much of its power when it's confronted rather than avoided. Another profound way they impact you is through their ability to stay grounded during chaos. Imagine being in the middle of a storm, with winds howling and debris flying everywhere. Most people would panic, trying to shield themselves or escape. But an awakened person stands still, calm, as if they know the storm will pass. Their calmness doesn't come from naivety or denial. It comes from a deep understanding that nothing lasts forever, not even chaos. When you see this, it can shift your own perspective. You begin to realize that life's storms aren't permanent. They come, they wreak havoc, and then they go. This understanding doesn't make challenges any easier, but it gives you a kind of resilience that wasn't there before. You stop being so easily thrown off course by every disruption or setback. Instead, you develop a quiet strength, a trust that you can handle whatever comes your way. Another striking aspect of their influence is how they make you question the way you see yourself. Most of us walk around with a mental image of who we are, our strengths, weaknesses, roles, and limitations. This image feels solid, but it's often just a collection of beliefs we've picked up over the years. An awakened person doesn't see you through the lens of these labels. They see something deeper, something unchanging. This can be unsettling at first because it challenges the stories you've been telling yourself. You start to realize how much of your identity is tied up in things that aren't truly you. The roles you play, the masks you wear, the judgments you've internalized, they all begin to feel less real. And as this happens, a different sense of self starts to emerge. It's not based on what you do or how others see you. It's something quieter, more solid, and infinitely more freeing. One of the most transformative things they do, though they'd never claim credit for it, is awaken your sense of interconnectedness. In the presence of an awakened person, it's hard to cling to the illusion that you're separate from everything else. You start to see how deeply connected you are to other people, to nature, to the very fabric of existence. This realization doesn't come as a dramatic epiphany. It's more like a quiet unfolding. You might notice it in small moments, like feeling a deeper empathy for others or being struck by the beauty of something ordinary. You begin to sense that life isn't a collection of isolated events but a web of relationships. This doesn't mean everything suddenly makes sense or becomes easy, but it does bring a sense of belonging that makes the challenges of life feel less lonely. Their influence also extends to how you approach success and failure. Most of us are taught to measure our worth by what we achieve. We chase success because we think it will make us happy, and we fear failure because we think it will diminish us. But an awakened person doesn't play this game. They understand that success and failure are just experiences, not measures of who you are. Watching this in action can be incredibly freeing. It makes you question why you've placed so much importance on outcomes. Why does winning feel like validation? Why does losing feel like rejection? Over time, you begin to see that your worth isn't tied to what you achieve. This doesn't mean you stop trying or striving, but your motivation shifts. You stop chasing approval and start doing things because they feel right, not because they'll make you look good. Lastly, their presence has a way of reconnecting you with something that often gets lost in the noise of daily life, a sense of wonder. Children have it naturally, but as we grow up, it gets buried under responsibilities, stress, and the constant push to be productive. An awakened person hasn't lost this sense of wonder. They see the beauty in things most people overlook: the play of light on a wall, the sound of wind through trees, the intricate patterns of a flower. Being around them reminds you that this wonder is still available to you. It's not something you have to create or search for. It's already here, waiting to be noticed. This realization can be a kind of homecoming, a return to a way of seeing the world that feels fresh and alive. In the end, meeting someone spiritually awakened isn't about them changing you. It's about them reminding you of what's already within you. They don't give you anything you don't already have. Instead, they help you see the parts of yourself that have been hidden, forgotten, or ignored. Their presence is like a gentle nudge, encouraging you to explore the vast, uncharted territory of your own being. The most profound thing about meeting someone spiritually awakened isn't just the immediate shifts you feel, but the long-term changes they inspire. Their presence acts as a kind of seed, planting ideas, questions, and realizations that continue to grow long after they're gone. The challenge, of course, is what to do with this newfound awareness. It's one thing to experience clarity in their presence, it's another to sustain it in your everyday life. The first step in living in alignment with what you've discovered is learning how to ground yourself. Being around an awakened person can feel like standing on solid ground for the first time, but once you step back into the chaos of the world, it's easy to feel unsteady again. This doesn't mean you've lost the connection, it means you need to find ways to anchor yourself. For many, this begins with small, consistent practices, taking a moment of stillness each day, tuning into your breath, or simply noticing the sensations in your body. This kind of grounding isn't about escaping your responsibilities or withdrawing from life. It's about bringing the clarity and calm you've glimpsed into everything you do. When you're grounded, you approach life's challenges with less reactivity and more presence. You start to notice the gap between what happens and how you respond, a gap that's always been there but was easy to miss. In this space, you have a choice to react out of habit or to respond from a place of awareness. Another critical part of integrating this experience is becoming more honest with yourself. An awakened person doesn't carry the same illusions most people do. They see life as it is, without the filters of fear or desire. This honesty isn't harsh or judgmental, it's freeing. They show you, often without saying a word, that facing the truth about yourself isn't something to fear. It's the beginning of real freedom. As you begin to practice this kind of honesty, you might notice patterns you hadn't seen before. Maybe you realize how much of your time is spent trying to control things that aren't in your power. Or maybe you start to see how much of your identity is tied up in roles you don't actually want to play. These realizations can be uncomfortable at first, but they're also liberating. Each one is an opportunity to let go of something that's been holding you back. Living in alignment also means simplifying your relationship with others. An awakened person doesn't play the games of power, validation, or manipulation that dominate so many interactions. They don't need to, because they're not trying to fill a void or prove their worth. When you adopt this same approach, you might find that your relationships change not because you're trying to change them, but because you're showing up differently. You start to listen more deeply, without the need to fix or judge. You set boundaries without guilt because you understand that love doesn't mean sacrificing your own well-being. You let go of the need to control how others see you, which frees you to be more authentic. And in doing so, you create space for others to do the same. Another aspect of living in alignment is redefining what success means to you. An awakened person doesn't measure their worth by external achievements, and they inspire you to question why you do. It's not that success doesn't matter, it's that the way we define it is often limited and narrow. When you let go of the need to prove yourself, you open up to a different kind of success, one that's rooted in joy, growth, and alignment with your values. This shift doesn't mean abandoning ambition. It means pursuing goals that resonate with who you truly are, rather than chasing things because society says you should. You start to see that the process is just as important as the outcome. In fact, the outcome often matters less than the way you engage with the journey. This kind of success isn't about accumulating things, it's about becoming more of who you already are. Living in alignment also requires embracing impermanence. An awakened person understands that nothing lasts forever, not joy, not pain, not even life itself. This isn't a source of sadness for them, it's a source of freedom. When you accept impermanence, you stop clinging to things that are meant to pass. You stop resisting change, even when it's uncomfortable. You start to see that every ending is also a beginning. This perspective can be incredibly grounding in a world that often feels uncertain. When you stop fighting against the natural flow of life, you find a kind of peace that isn't dependent on circumstances. You can appreciate moments of happiness without fearing their end. You can face challenges without being overwhelmed by them. And you can let go of things that no longer serve you, knowing that space is being made for something new. Perhaps the most important part of living in alignment is staying connected to the sense of interconnectedness that an awakened person brings into focus. It's easy to lose sight of this in the day-to-day rush, but it's always there, waiting to be noticed. You don't have to retreat to a monastery or spend hours meditating to feel it. It's in the small, ordinary moments, helping a stranger, watching the wind move through the trees, feeling gratitude for the people in your life. When you stay connected to this sense of interconnectedness, it changes the way you move through the world. You start to see that your actions, no matter how small, have ripple effects. You become more mindful of how you treat others, not because you're trying to be virtuous, but because you see that their pain and joy are not separate from your own. This awareness doesn't make life easier, but it does make it richer and more meaningful. In the end, living in alignment with what you've discovered isn't about becoming like the awakened person who inspired you. It's about becoming more fully yourself. Their presence isn't a template to copy, it's a reminder that the same clarity, strength, and love they embody are also within you. They've simply uncovered what was always there, and now it's your turn to do the same. The path isn't always easy, and it won't look the same for everyone. But the beauty of it is that you don't have to do it perfectly. Each step, no matter how small, brings you closer to a life that feels true. And as you walk this path, you might find that you, too, become a quiet force in the lives of others, not by trying to teach or change them, but simply by being who you are,